Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This week, so I was basically listening to an episode with Chrissy Chella, a podcast episode with Chrissy Chella, who is an influencer online in the fitness industry. She's got like an app, she's got an activewear line, and she's like very publicly had like, I think 2 engagements that she broke off, and she's currently engaged, and it happened in a very like short period of time. And in the podcast episode, she was basically talking about like why those relationships, like her previous relationships, broke down. And she was talking about how she's someone that's in her masculine a lot in terms of being a woman in business, and also as an immigrant, because I think she came to the UK from Albania when she was super young. So she's had that kind of you have to work hard mentality from a very young age. And she was talking about how that impacted on her actual romantic relationships at home, in terms of like she was constantly in her masculine in the business during the day when she's running everything. And then she comes home and she had to kind of stay in her masculine because her partner maybe didn't support so much her, or like maybe give her a safe enough space for her to like not be in her masculine still. And that's something that I really related to when she said it on the podcast, because I think I kind of sleepwalk in my masculine like a lot. Like I am very, and if you're a Virgo oldest daughter, you probably are in your masculine a lot as well. Because I am very like independent, want to get things done myself, want to retain control, want to know everything. Very driven, very ambitious, which on the surface, super great great personality traits to have as a person and also a person in business. But if you apply that to a person who wants to be like a soft loving partner, how do you accommodate that? How do you actually communicate with your partner that you don't want to, I guess, be like that you need a safe space at home where you can just not use your brain, where you recognize that you actually need that as well? Because it's taken me a while to even realize that I'm exhausted because I'm like this all the time, which means I need a partner that allows me to not be like this all the time, or maybe encourages me to not be like this all the time. So I think this episode is essentially all about how to maybe not be in your masculine all the time if you are someone who's super driven, super ambitious, you have big goals, big dreams, and how to actually develop a relationship with your partner to accommodate these personality traits and collaborate with them so that you can have like a relationship that actually helps you in business and allows you to rest. So I want to pass the mic over to Farah, because I feel like you're much better at this than me in terms of like leaning into your softness, especially recently, leaning into your softness and like leaning into being out of your masculine a little bit more. But can you relate to being in it a lot? And how have you raised these things with Sunny, or did they take a while to raise with Sunny itself?
Yeah, so I think the reason I've slowly started to get better at it is because I've just been looking into it so much and trying to practice it so much more recently, especially after getting married. I didn't like the idea of being this masculine energy in the relationship, like constantly battling for that like masculine role that I was like constantly trying to live up to. And I think at some point I just kind of realized in myself, like, why am I doing that? Like, what benefit is that having to anyone in this relationship? Like, and I think it comes down to 2 things. Like you mentioned, there are men out there that are already in their feminine and they're not really going to give you that safe space that you need to then lean into it yourself, because they're already in it. So they're just going to kind of fulfill that role. But then you can end up still with a masculine man in his masculine energy quite strongly, but then because you just end up butting heads. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that you're the one in the wrong energy, like when you're interacting with them, then that's not going to be a very smooth sailing experience anyway, because you're constantly going to be like trying to take over being in your masculine and not really tapping out of that. And I feel like because he is so heavily into it, I feel like that has helped me like get rid of mine just while I'm around him, because I think it's more a case of you trying to figure out, okay, when are the right times for me to be in my masculine and when are the right times for me to be in my feminine? Because I don't think it's a case of just kind of getting rid of one, or as a woman, I'm only ever going to be in my feminine energy. Masculine energy serves a purpose for us as well. I think what I've realized is that I can pick and choose. It doesn't have to be this like, oh, if I'm getting like triggered in some way, or if those like personality traits are coming out because I'm in a situation where I feel like, okay, this is how I usually operate, so I'm going to continue doing it. It's that case of, okay, sitting back, realizing the environment you're in, realizing, am I with my partner right now, or am I at work dealing with a boss or dealing with a client that I need to, do you know what I mean, like have this different energy with that person. So I think that's what I've tried to do a lot, is like acknowledge that actually masculine energy is really useful in certain situations, but it's when do I play into that more, and when do I actually acknowledge, no, I need to switch my energy now and I need to be more in my feminine. So it goes without saying, like while you're with your man and he's obviously in his masculine, like the balance is you being in your feminine. So I don't know if it's really been a conversation that I've had with him specifically. I think it's just over time when I've noticed like he already has this like energy about him where he wants to take care of things. He's the kind of the fixer, the logical, has that logical thought process, and he's the one that kind of just deals with things in a certain way that if I was trying to kind of micromanage or control the situation, that's me being my masculine. That it's not necessary to do. I've had to really learn to like rein that in and just let him, you know, do things in his logical, like what makes sense in his head, and let him take care of things. I feel like there was a big period of time where I just refused to be taken care of. Like I was like, I've got my own back. Like I'm an independent woman. I don't need, like, I am with you, but I don't need you. And I had this very strong mindset towards like, and he takes a mick out of me so much now. It's so funny because I used to be so, I guess he never really took it seriously, which is why like he didn't really get offended by it. But I used to be so, and I think you can actually see it from all the content that I put online, and this, like, I was very masculine in my energy. Like I was very much like, I can do this on my own. Like I have my own back and like I don't need anyone type of energy. But if you're in a relationship that doesn't serve him and it doesn't serve you, because he wants to be the provider, like that's what a masculine energy is. They provide, they protect, and they're the ones that kind of take control in those situations or kind of lead, or that is the masculine energy. So for you to then be as a woman, deal with that same situation the same way, you can't really have two leaders in the same situation because then you are butting heads at that point. So I think I just learned that I didn't have to be in control of everything and things would still get done, or, you know, I had to just, I guess, trust. So I think what a big part of it was for me is just learning to trust that someone else could take care of things, someone else could be responsible for things, and I didn't have to take the burden of everything on myself, and I didn't have to have everything done in a certain way. And I think I also was very like critical of the way he would do things, or, you know, if he did it, there had to be like a right way for stuff, and I kind of let all of that go. And I'm trying to think if there's any other like ways that I kind of implemented feminine energy. The only thing I can think of is being in like that flow state more. I think I used to be very hell-bent on this like logical kind of way of thinking, and I think that kind of stunted my creativity a lot as well at some point, because I was so kind of focused on, you know, like if you're looking at things from a business perspective, oh, but the only way to grow a business is to be really strategic and, you know, be super logical and look at the analytics and, you know, be this, that is the masculine essentially. And I thought that was the only way to make sure something was going to be a success, but actually the creativity side is just as important. And I feel like that also gets knocked quite a lot as the more like, oh, airy fairy, you know, doesn't mean to be taken as seriously. But actually, if you think about like even the businesses that we've got and the way that we work, that is the most crucial part, is the creativity, you know, like just having those ideas and just being in that flow state is very feminine. But I think when it comes to, maybe because in society those like job roles especially, they're considered more like not as serious, they're just considered more like silly, you know, like I guess just, yeah, not as serious. So when you think about feminine energy being in the flow state, again, it's just not something that you think, oh, is important, I guess.
I think the difference for me is like to be in my flow state and also to like relinquish control a little bit to my partner, with my partner, is for me to accept that things might go wrong. And I think that acceptance I find hard as someone who's like quite ambitious and driven, because I'm like, if I'm dreaming big, there's no room for things to go wrong. Or like if there is room to go for if there is room for things to go wrong, then like what does that mean for my big dreams and like our big dreams in our life together? Like that, I think that's where I find it difficult to like not try and keep things in check all the time and, you know, retain that control aspect and never really be in flow state ever.
Yeah, but I guess it depends what specifically is the task, or what is it that they've kind of taken control of, or you're hoping to kind of lessen the burden on yourself that you're worried about. Because then you have to just look at what is the worst case scenario. Like if that thing I don't just kind of leave them to and let them do, is that actually going to, you know, kill all of our goals? And like, is that going to stop us from reaching the next level? Is that going to stop us achieving these like later things? Because a lot of the time it probably isn't going to have that huge impact that you're telling yourself it will. But I get what you're saying, because it is the scariest part, is like that first, you know, test of like, I'm gonna let go of the reins a little bit, but then you panic, because then you're like, but then what if that's the worst decision I ever made?
Yeah, that's my panic. Yeah,
big regrets.
I think the other thing that also like I struggle with is like, me and Sam are really into like business and like what I do online. Like he's just as interested in everything that I'm interested in, which is really, really nice to have in a relationship. But I worry that like if we're both interested and fired up by the same things, will we ever both like also rest and take a step back from that together? Because I think this is what I picked up from like the episode with Chrissy Chella. It was like the partner she was talking about where she couldn't like not be in her masculine with, he was her co-founder for this like major app that she's had so much success with. So like obviously they were both just like constantly go. And I think she said on the episode like she wanted to just come home, have her dinner made, and like be able to just chill, but that was just never the case. And what I've tried to do to try and like, not that I'm Chrissy Chella at all, or like, and I'm planning on starting this amazing app or anything, but talk to Sam about like, okay, well, from these hours, I'm like constantly thinking about things that could go wrong, business ideas, how to be creative, content idea, all these things. I'm thinking about them. We can do that together during like these hours, and then maybe on like Wednesday nights, we actually, you know, act like we're a couple and not like business partners, if that makes sense. And like, I don't know if that is actually collaboratively setting boundaries. And I didn't really want to say that word because I'm getting the ick with like the word or the phrase setting boundaries a little bit, because I feel like, yeah, there's definitely so much discourse now around like over therapizing language with like friends and partners and stuff. But I think that's something you maybe need to do if you are in your masculine a lot, is especially with the people you love. I feel like this expands further past like a romantic partner, and also maybe like your family or just like close relationships, is actually setting boundaries for when you're not going to actually be in your masculine. Because I think we talk a lot about setting boundaries for like, okay, I'm going to stop working at this time and I'm going to start winding down, or I'm going to start doing like mindfulness activities at this time and be strict with it. But actually you have to do that with someone, especially if you're living with people like a family member or your family or a partner, you're not doing those things by yourself. So you need to actually like set those boundaries together and actually act on them, like respect them enough to actually act on them, which I think is really important. But do you do that? Because I also read this, I don't know if it was a tweet or I think it was maybe the Airbnb, one of the founders of Airbnb. I can't remember who said it, but they were talking about how on Tuesday nights it was like an absolute non-negotiable that they had time with their wife. And it was like for years that they did this. So like even if things were on fire at work, they were leaving the office Tuesday 5 p.m. They were never going to be there because it was always that like sacred safe space with his wife and his family. And I feel like for women in their masculine, you need that time as well. Like you need like carved out time where you're actually not thinking about how to control anything. You're not thinking about whether you're quote unquote safe or not. And by safe, I mean like you've got your meal sorted or you've got like a period of rest sorted. It's like you're not actually having to think about if you'll be okay. And I feel like that's a really important time to have like carved out consistently in your diary with someone you love as well. Because the other thing is when we get to the end of like, and you hear from all these amazing like famous CEOs and founders and entrepreneurs and philanthropists, like they get to retirement and they're like, what are your top 5 regrets? And it always comes up. They're like, I wish I spent more time with my wife. I wish I spent more time with my family. So we all know that, especially as big, ambitious people, we've got big dreams we're chasing now, but it's becoming very clear that you have to balance time with your loved ones if you actually want to make the journey worth it and you don't want regrets at the end. So it's like not being in your masculine is actually a business priority.
That's so true.
As well, I think, a little bit.
It's a similar situation where Sonny has his own business. I'm self-employed as well. And I feel like when you don't have that structure of, okay, I've got a 9 to 5 that I'm working at every day. And then in the evenings, like this is our evening time. And what do we do with that? Our days don't work like that. So it has been quite a struggle to carve out like specific time for when we kind of have those moments, just because one day it could be has a crazy day and he has to like, you know, work longer hours or things like that. But at the same time, he has generally been quite good at making sure we do have that time, regardless, whether like whenever it comes up in the week. I feel like it seems to me, it's not that we've had like a specific conversation on this, although it's definitely something I brought up in terms of like, I want that quality time. And I know that like we both have crazy schedules and stuff. And I guess post-wedding as well, like things were so mad like pre-wedding because we had that on top and all the different stuff that was going on. But post-wedding, I've kind of been a bit more like intentional of, okay, like, are we going to do like something specifically together, like once a week, every fortnight? Like I wanted some kind of like calendar entry of this like frequency of something that was going to happen. But it's just turned out that I just don't think that's possible with our schedules. So I think it is a bit more ad hoc now in terms of like that quality time. But I think the other way that I kind of still get that safe space or, you know, that ability to kind of just be in my feminine more is actually communicating more around like my luteal phase and stuff with him. So when it hits that time, that's generally the time for me I just struggle anyway. And I don't have the energy to be in my masculine. I don't have the energy to like take control over everything and, you know, like be bossy and, you know, like just have my finger in every pie. Like, yeah, I just want peace and I just want like, yeah, no problems. So I feel like during that time, it's a lot easier for me to just completely let go and just, you know, but then also I feel like because we talked about it quite a lot and how it affects me and like just what I need during that time as well, I feel like there is an understanding there that like we just operate as a couple, I think, quite differently then, because of that reasoning. And then obviously I've also experienced like very painful periods for such a long time, and he's so I guess, used to that. And I guess, again, there's just like an underlying understanding of, okay, during that time, like he kind of takes care of everything. Like, say, for example, even, I guess it's more so like household stuff now that we've started living together. But if there's something that I can't do, he'll pick it up, and he knows that that's just the way it is during that period of time, because I can't physically do it myself. And I feel like that's just maybe like an unwritten rule we have because of how we've discussed these things, and how I guess he knows it affects me, and it's just our way of like, it's just that whole, you know, you see those, I don't know if it's a meme or a post online where it says like, if someone like can't give their 100, like you kind of, in a relationship, you kind of have to fulfill that. So like, not everyone's all, it's not like a 50-50 kind of partnership where you're giving half, they're giving half. It's like sometimes they're 80 and you're 20 and you make the 100. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of that situation. So I feel like it's more because of, you know, the hormonal imbalances and the things going on in my body during the month that kind of forces us to kind of operate that way. But generally, I can't say that we have like a set schedule and like, you know, how we kind of make sure like things operate in other times of the month. But I think he's quite mindful to make sure that, I don't know, I feel like if your partner like likes you though, they want to make sure that they're spending time with you.
I think it's like when you're both, like if you're with someone who's driven and you're quite driven, it's just so easy to forget. Like we've spent a long time like not putting quality time like as a priority, just because we both forget. And also when you live with someone, it's hard to pick apart the time to spend together when you're actually spending 24 hours a day together anyway.
To be honest, I think quality is the key word there as well, because I think what happens with us is, okay, he'll carve out, okay, we're gonna go for dinner together, or we're gonna, you know, have this time together, but then he'll still be working at the same time, or he'll still like have other stuff going on, or his phone's going off, or he's, you know, got this business to deal with. And it's like, well, then can I call that quality time? I don't think I can. Like, it's not dedicated. So I get what you're saying. It's like in scenarios like that, but then I've just kind of learned that in a similar way, if things come up for me, I would expect him to be understanding of that. So
yeah,
it kind of works both ways. And like you said, when you are in a couple where you're both equally driven, like you've got goals, you want to make them happen, kind of do end up thinking, okay, well, I've got this stuff going on. Like, you're a bit more understanding of their situation as well, because in the same way, like if I had something come up, or I had to take a call, or if something was going on in my business world, I'd expect him to understand that I'm preoccupied. But then that doesn't really help in the long term if you're constantly doing that to each other. So you do have to get a middle ground on, okay, like you mentioned, that guy, it doesn't matter if the office is on fire, like, you are my priority now. But I feel like when you're starting out, I feel like the positions that we're in, you're starting out, you're in the early stage of your business, you've got this whole projection ahead of you. It's so hard to think of anything but that, because you're like, okay, but when I get to that level, then we can have that time. And, you know, when I reach that next stage, then we can do all those things that we plan, you know, like have this unconditional time for each other where we're so focused on each other, where, you know, we're doing so much together because now we've freed up the time because we're not working so hard on those goals that we've now achieved. So I feel like when you have that picture in your head, you're like, okay, but when I get to that level then, but then it's a case of, well, actually, you should just be doing that on the way up. So
yeah. And also with things like that, it's like you have to remember life is short, and you never know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And you never know if you'll even get to that stage that you're holding off all these like nice experiences for. But I really like what you said about like, actually, you're not always 50-50 with your partner at home. And actually one of my friends earlier in the year, we were talking about how they just maintain their relationship, and they use that framework as well, but they actually vocalize it to each other. Like, they'll actually ask each other like, how are you feeling today? And if they've had a tough day and they're like 10%, then at least you know they're at 10%. And it's not necessarily that you have to then be at 90, but you just know that like
expectations will shift, I think, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I also like what you said about like your luteal phase, because I feel like that's a good way to almost just start to teeth your way into leaning out of your masculine. If you're in your masculine a lot as a woman, because I think I might start doing that in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna vocalize what phase I'm in, like actually make your partner aware of like what's going on with your body and stuff, because they're not going to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they're aware, actually telling them what you do and don't want to do, to be honest. And like actually over time that just becomes a habit, like it has done with you. And I think that's been hard for me to do as someone who's like only just recognized their phases, their menstrual cycle phases.
Yeah.
And I've started making that adjustment for myself, and now I'm like, okay, I have to communicate this now to
you have
my
to
partner.
teach this. But you know what I did in the beginning, which might sound crazy, I don't know, but I think this was when I very first started understanding it myself. And I don't know, sometimes I find it really hard to like verbalize or, you know, be coherent in like explaining something, especially when I've just learned it myself. I'm like, I don't know if I'm getting my point across, and also I know he's never ever gonna experience this for himself. So how do I actually make him understand? So I think quite in the early stages when I was understanding the different phases, I literally made this note in my notes app. I probably still have it now. I kind of stopped using it a few months in, but I'd put down, so I'd change it every single month, so I'd update it every month, and this was basically my monthly calendar of my cycle. So I would have like the dates, the predicted dates of like each phase I was in the cycle. And then I'd have like columns of like, okay, what he could and couldn't do, and like how I was feeling. And like I literally wrote it all out, because I was like, that's the only way that's just my way of communicating it. I didn't know any other way. And I don't like constantly like bringing stuff up with someone as well. Like I wanted to just put it in that note at the beginning of the month, so like that point I knew what dates would fall on which phase and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to do that once, and then he kind of knows where I'm at throughout the month, and then I don't have to constantly bring it up. Then it's there for him to just digest, and you know, he can look back on it. Like if he I don't know, forgets, then it's there. Like I don't have to be like, you know what, today I'm in my luteal phase and I'm feeling like this. Like I hated the thought of that. Like I don't know, I don't think I'm very good at communicating my feelings like verbally.
Yeah.
So that was my way of just being like, these things are happening, and this is like how I know this is what I need, and it's all there. So if you have questions, if you're confused, then tell me. But if not, then like
any questions, email me.
I'll get back to you in 48 hours. But this is how I'm operating. This is like what my body's going through. And I think when you're in a relationship, it does really serve you well to do that. Because I actually noticed a change actually since I did that. I think it then, now I don't know like how much time he spent looking at it. Maybe he just looked at it for a second and, you know, didn't really digest it properly. But I did notice that it maybe just made it more realistic in terms of he could then see, okay, like there's a difference in my body, and I guess he always knew it because he saw it firsthand. Like he could see me changing, but the same way with me
turning into the Hulk.
Basically, but he could see it in me and my body language and the way I behaved. But the same way I didn't clock that it was like a regular cycle, it's hard for someone else too as well. So
yeah,
I think when you put it like that, and when you realize, okay, like each month, like the days might shift slightly, but round about this time, this is how I'm going to be feeling, and this is how my body is dealing with all these emotions and hormones, then if you kind of give them a guide of like, okay, well, this is how I'm feeling, but this is also how you can help. I think that's what I did. I was like, this is how I'm feeling, this is how you can help. And then I was like I just put a bunch of stuff in there of like what would help me whatever phase it was. And I think after doing that I think I did that for a few months, and then after that it was very much like I didn't feel like I needed to, because then I think at that point also I felt a bit more comfortable vocalizing it as well, because then I was like, look, you know, like you already are familiar with this at this point, so maybe that is something to start with if you're the same and you're not really great at communicating your feelings, and you just don't want to have those awkward conversations, because a lot of the time I don't. And I think that's probably the trouble I get myself into, is that I just internalize everything and I suffer.
Then
And
get
then
mad.
yeah, and then it just like it's outburst, and then it's like, oh, well, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah. You know what? I'm actually going to do that now. I'm going to invite Sam to the events I've made for my luteal phase. Well, I'll either invite him or I'll just put it in our shared calendar. I think that will work as
Yeah.
well. And then have like a list of like things I don't want to do. Yeah. I like that. I'm actually going to do that.
Because I feel like the more you involve them, the more chance you have of like not having to repeat and explain yourself, and it kind of just becomes more normal to them as well. So
Yeah.
let me know how it goes.
I will on an update. That means he can look at the calendar and be like, okay, I won't schedule a big trip for this date then, which would be really great. So that is it for this week's episode. I hope that was helpful. I have certainly got a takeaway from that in a half an hour. So I hope you have. But if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to follow our podcast, give us a rating if you enjoyed it, leave us a little comment or a feedback comment. And if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a comment and like the video. But that is it for this episode, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.